let me just what's your back line? What's your starting back line?
Um,
Or does that go into buy, I guess?
it's a little bit in the buy, and it's sort of up in the air. I mean, I'm not sure what Ten Hag thinks of a lot of these players, honestly. Um, Probably the starting back line uh, from that list is Maguire and Varane at center back and Sean Dallow at fullback, ignoring potential signings for the time being. Um, I really rate Lindelof, and I think particularly with Ten Hag now as the manager, who sort of has this philosophy of if you're not performing, you're following instructions, you'll be benched in a way that Solskjaer certainly didn't and was really heavily criticized for playing these players um, who were in probably the worst form of their career. So I think Lindelof's kind of the ideal backup there. But I think you have to, with the investment you have in Maguire, and don't laugh, but as good as he has been outside of this last season, I think you have to give him a shot. I mean, if the season we finished second, I know I have talked a big game about Maguire, but he was one of the better center backs in the Premier League in a consistent team. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to be the best or team of the season or anything, but there's a world in which he's a good center back who helps us with our build-up play. And then Varane, I think, is an obvious one. The biggest question with him is if he can stay fit, um, which hopefully he can. Although I mean, last season he showed he certainly is struggling with that as he gets older. But if he is fit, then I think he's an incredible center back, and he did show that in flashes. And then the fullbacks, again, if we're leaving out by sort of pick themselves. I know Shaw is rated really highly internally at the club. He obviously didn't have a great season last year, but no one outside of Ronaldo really did. So it's hard to hold that against him. And then Dallo is sort of I don't rate him personally. Apparently Ten Hag at least wants to keep him around, but with the options there, he would be the starter at right back, which is not great, but it is what it is at the moment.
Yeah, I'm interested to know Maguire. How do you what's the solution with him? Is it an attitude thing or like a morale thing, or do you think he needs to be accommodated? Like you need more defensive solidity around him in order to thrive, or is it a managerial system? Like
I,
he's such a enigma of a player.
I actually think
Because you're right, I've seen the numbers. His build up
he's
numbers, his
good.
ball progression numbers,
Well, and he's incredible in
his
the air.
aerial numbers. Yeah,
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's attitude. I mean, he's actually a player who has rarely had attitude issues, um, in sort of the high profile complaining way. Um, I would take the captain's armband off him, and I think not as a slight, or I wouldn't frame it as a demotion, but just I don't think he's a player at this stage in his career, maybe ever, who's sort of equipped to have that mantle, particularly in a dressing room that has players like Ronaldo and Sancho, and hopefully we get a couple high profile midfielders in. Um, so I think that I don't think the burden of captain has really helped him, particularly in these, uh, the quite difficult last season in particular. Um, Otherwise, I mean, it's hard to say. I think having a settled team will really help with a clear philosophy. I mean, as much as I liked Solskjaer in the moment, I don't ever think he really had a system that was defined in the way that like the elite European teams have these defined systems that help. I mean, City, there's some obvious examples of players who you would consider to be more average that look quite good because of how good Guardiola is as a man manager and how easy it is to slot into his system in particular circumstances. Otherwise, I would say, I mean, beyond the settled team, yeah, having defensive solidity around him, particularly in midfield, helps. There's plenty of clips that I see of him that are often used sort of to beat him over the head with, where he's, isolated in a 1v3 or a 2v1, or, Luke Shaw has left his man at the halfway line. And so Maguire's had to go way out of position to try and cut him off. So I think obviously I wouldn't ever argue that, particularly in the last season, he's been abysmal and has had some shocking mistakes when you see the replays. But a lot of that is also the product of the team around him, where it's just, I mean, even, replace Maguire with Diaz or Laporte, and I think they look similar last season, just on an island completely. Often left to hang out to dry. So hopefully Ten Hag is instilling a particular system. He gets one or two signings in that can help defensively. And I think that will do a world of good for Maguire.
Yeah, it's crazy how much I, I I do think probably just purely like taken out of context that Laporte and Diaz are still better footballers than Harry Maguire. But
Oh,
like, I
yeah,
think do have those isolated moments where they're getting flamed on Twitter and the slow mo replays where they're out of position or not covering their man or didn't challenge them in the air or whatever. But I do think I think you said to me once like yeah if you put if Harry Maguire ended up going to Man City I don't like he'd probably be at least talked about like John Stones where it's like you can't deny that he's had very, very good performances and
yeah,
very, very good years and put together a good string of form, but he still has those like a mistake in him. Like it's also, I swear, just like being English, man, like the amount of pressure on the national
yeah.
team and like they always go for those bigger fees, right? Like
Well, and he,
when's the last time you really heard about a high profile English move that someone's called it a bargain, right? Like it's always like
never, yeah,
Sterling Stones, like it's always a move with expectations.
yeah. And I mean, he's a player who aesthetically is not very pleasing. Like when he screws up, it's a little bit like Phil Jones,
He's
where
ugly too, man. Talking
he he just looks like an
aesthetics.
idiot when he's trying
Fox.
to track back or run or and I probably rate him higher than most people, but I would still say that like he will always have a mistake in him and he will always not look like prime Varane in the way he's smooth and composed. But um I think there's a world where he's a good center back again for United. That not great, not world class, but good.
Okay, well, so then why are you in for a center back? It's not
Uh,
to replace Varane.
it's not to replace Varane. It's I honestly couldn't tell you because this is um they're not going to sell. I would be surprised. Varane, Lindelof, or Maguire. They're hopefully going to sell Ian Jones. We'll get into that. I mean, that's not complicated. Their time is done. Um, so I'm not sure what the idea is with a center back. I think they'd like a fourth string center back, but Pau Torres, the primary name, or Urian Timber aren't fourth string center backs. Um, so I don't know what the thinking would be there, whether it's just Varane injury insurance, if they're really, maybe they know something we don't about where he's at physically. Maybe there's an offer on the table for Lindelof. I like him, but if there's a high enough offer, then I don't have a problem with him walking for to make way for Torres. It also might be a bit of a luxury move where they've had such problems with center backs that if they have the money by July and have all of their other major targets secured, he has a release clause. I think Villarreal is willing to even negotiate from there. Then it might just be a luxury move to really sort of secure that part of the team to cover for Varane being physically done, Maguire not ever recovering his form. Because there is a world where Varane gets injured 2 games in and Maguire is still last season's Maguire, and suddenly it's Lindelof and whoever our fourth string center back is.
Yeah. Do you think that your backline is equipped in terms of the profile of each player to play in a Ten Hag backline? I'm not too familiar with his tactics, but you know, do you think that's why seems to be dipping into the market for defenders? Is that he doesn't think
It could be. I mean, Torres is the only out and out center back. I mean, both Timber and the other defensive names that we'll get to can play center back, but are also comfortable at fullback. And that's where I'd imagine they get most of their minutes initially if we do go that direction. Obviously, having them at center back cover for the reasons I just mentioned would be big. I think each of Lindelof, Maguire, and Varane are good enough to succeed in Ten Hag's system if everything goes right for them. I think Maguire in particular, well, and Lindelof too, at this with his ball playing ability, um, would be good. And Torres is an interesting name as the only out and out center back because he's a player that we've been linked to for a couple years now, like preceding Ten Hag. So I don't know if that's just he's one of the few names that overlap between Ten Hag's list and the club's list, or if he's just sort of too good a player to pass up. And if that's the case, I would get it at the price he'd be available at. I think he'll be the Spain starter for years to come. He's looked completely composed and comfortable in the Champions League, and I saw firsthand in the Europa League final. I think it might just be a case of he's a player too good to pass up.
okay. So with well, I guess What I feel like we could just talk about the transfers now. Like,
Yeah, that probably makes
to
sense.
what 11 do you think? Sorry, what backline would you roll with? Like,
Um, in an ideal world, I would start the season with Maguire, Varane, and I would say Timber at right back. I don't think they're going to get Timber at this point, which is a shame. Um,
okay, so that's what I
Louis
was asking.
Louis Van Gaal's been in his ear. Um, I think they'll probably end up getting a someone as a backup left back, whether that's I have Tyrell Malacia from Feyenoord or Lissandro Martinez from Ajax down right now. Both those are obviously players that Ten Hag has had a close look at and clearly seems to rate highly. Um, Martinez provides center back cover. Malacia is still quite young, and so wouldn't I don't think expect to start. I think Shaw is certainly going to get a run out as the starting left back, and I know he's rated highly internally, but I think it would be nice to have real competition for him beyond Tellez, who I think is probably will get to one of the players leaving the club. And then at center back, I've said Maguire and Varane. You know, I would not complain if it was Varane and Pau Torres. I don't know what Maguire and Pau Torres would look like. I don't think I'd feel great about that. Um, but I'm not too picky on the center backs, honestly. I mean, if Ten Hag loves Lindelof, then I have no problem with Lindelof starting. If it's Lindelof and Varane, I think that's a good pairing. And they actually had a couple games where they looked quite good together last season. Um, a lot of this is just I don't know which way Ten Hag's going to go. I think he's got options, but we'll see. And then right back is kind of a little scary because I really don't rate Dallo. I hope Wan-Bissaka leaves. I just don't think it's worked out. And beyond Timber, I haven't really seen any strong links to right backs. So it's not a fun prospect going into the season with Dallo as the starting right back and probably Lindelof out of position as his backup. Um, so that's yeah, not amazing, but that might again be just a position that isn't given the attention it needs because we have so many holes in the team still.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to project how they're gonna do because all their signings are pretty what if like iffy like what
Yeah,
that's gonna happen. Not really like I feel like you kind of have to first of all start with is Frankie De Jong gonna happen or not, and then go from there because
yeah.
I think that'd be a big like domino type move where
Well,
other people would follow.
I think that's how the club's been operating so far. Um, the numbers. It sounds like they're going to aim for 4 to 5 players this transfer window, and not all of them are going to be Frankie De Jong's level, where they sort of walk into the team and are immediately one of the best players. But that's probably 2 midfielders, an attacker, and then 1 or 2 defenders, depending on budget and who's available. So again, as we go through the team, you'll see there's holes everywhere and a lot of positions that I don't feel amazing about. So even with that level of incoming, I mean, one of the defenders will probably be Malacia or Martinez, who won't be immediate starters that transform the team. I would really hope that if there's a second defender there, it's a right back. But if Pau Torres is too good to pass up, then maybe that's just a hole that they leave until January. I mean, it sounds like the major issue with Timber is just being he wants to start for the first half of the season to preserve his World Cup spot, which is fair enough. And then Ajax don't want to sell obviously all of their players immediately, so they're sticking a little bit on that. So I could easily see them leaving right back sort of open and going into January and really targeting Timber then.